So, good to have you all here. So, welcome here tonight to our next session of the Mars webinar series. Mars, your partner for market access and pricing strategy. My name is Lutz Wurmer, and I will be your moderator tonight. And together with Stefan Walzer, the CEO and founder of Mars, as always, almost every last Thursday, not this month, but next month also, last Thursday of the month at 2000 German time or 1200 Pacific time, we have our webinar about the topics of market access and reimbursement. So, and today we have actually a great topic, a market access across Europe. And we are streaming now again live on LinkedIn. So welcome to all the people out there. So just before we come on today's topic, some few words about Mars. Mars is the German-speaking market access experts we are your experts in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, and we do all the stuff for pricing and reimbursement strategies or reimbursement submissions for the Federal Joint Committee in Germany or the German digital healthcare apps. There are the submissions for the BfArM, or the Swiss BAG, or the Austrian Hauptverband. And also we do all the calculation if you need any help with your health economics, and also we have a great support for you for the negotiations. Especially we have developed a really fancy and really also scientific a VR negotiation bootcamp. So you sit there actually with VR glasses and have a nice training on your next price negotiations. So if you're interested in that, just give us a call. But coming back to our tonight's webinar, as always, feel free to ask questions. And after the presentation of Stefan and Sandro, we will have plenty of time for your questions. And how to ask your questions, just put it on the comment section to post your questions and comments here. Please highlight your questions with a capital Q. And actually, Angelina was already asking, will there be a recording of the webinar? Yes, there will be. Just check out our webpage, Market Access, www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de, and there the videos will be published on our website or also on our YouTube channel, where you can subscribe it. But now let's come to our presenters and discussants today. Market access across Europe. I'm happy to have tonight two great speakers here and very experienced experts. Live from Weil am Rhein, from the Mars headquarters, the CEO of Mars and former manager from Hoffmann La Roche is here, Dr. Stefan Walzer. Hello, Stefan.
Good night, Lutz. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, and as you could hear, there was a lightning last days in Weil am Rhein, and Stefan doesn't have actually a good internet connection tonight, right? Still struggling?
I don't feel that, Lutz.
Okay.
I can.
Okay. So, and also from our second guest tonight, and we're really happy that we could convince him to come here to our webinar, is Sandro Cesaro. Dr. Sandro Cesaro has a long career at Hoffmann La Roche and is now the head of market access and innovative value strategies, Oncology Europe of AstraZeneca. Welcome, Sandro Cesaro. Hi, Sandro. Good to have you here.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks, Lutz.
Oh, great. So two great speakers, and now it's actually time for our topic. So not a nightmare before Christmas, but maybe a nightmare before a summer break. So Stefan, is there a happy end for market access across Europe?
Of course. No, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important. I think to probably consider a couple of things. Sandro will especially speak to those topics, but I will start introducing. Why is market access? Why is reimbursement important? I think it's here. The technology assessment, which is the let's call it scientific basis for decisions by payer, the kind of core driver finally for both parts of your commercial success. one is basically the revenue, so the number of sales, and both together is then at HTA. The outcomes of HTA are also could be drivers of share price for the companies. Obviously, depending a bit how many, let's say, products you have, different kind of areas you might have, etc. The next slide, please, Lutz. I think core question is how do those analysis, how do those decisions, let's say, base, or how are they based? I mean, end of the day, it looks quite, let's say, easy. I think especially we have health technology assessment is a broad term. So at the end of the day, have a look on clinical. There's a quite clear picture. There's a so-called clinical evidence pyramide. I think everybody knows how you go. The more acceptable is basically your clinical evidence base. So if you have report, it's maybe less valuable than if you would, for example, have randomized controlled trial, have even a kind of systematic review consisting of various RCTs, so randomized trials. Sounds logic, sounds easy. Next part would then be, next slide, illustrating obviously the kind of, let's say, differences, or at the end, equality between outcomes and costs. Outcomes, we have just discussed this. Costs should as well be quite easy to collect. You could think of, please look, if you have a look on the global context of health, it won't be that easy. I mean, it looks already, I think just having a look on those different, looks already quite, let's say, strange, quite difficult. You have a couple of North America, obviously, especially in Canada nationally, but also in the provinces. You have some in South Africa. Not forgetting about Australia, obviously, and a couple of as well HTAS. But I think just having a look on Europe, where our kind of idea is basically now focusing on, there might be some difficulties in terms of HTA and the evaluation. So the local context is, I mean, in local context could as well mean what is the right kind of comparator, what else to be considered, and that might vary hugely. I think, Lutz, we have run as well a couple of, but we have as well analyzed, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, but also diabetes, and a couple of other areas where that, let's say, in some areas, products were available because they have been assessed with the same evidence base, and suddenly in some other countries it was not the case. It was not always that Germany was, let's say, the good guy. A lot of times that they were even the bad guys, just taken into account. On top of that, HTA does not only mean it's always only on a national. Well, speak to that in a minute. Considering also, for example, the lawyers across different jurisdictions, for example, Italy and Spain. And not just to make it even more complex, we have obviously international reference, which is not only consisting, or let's say the kind of considering or as consideration, especially also across the world. So finally, the question is to deal and manage such a complexity. And sorry for the audio. Sandro is now having a better audio there, and I think he will now as well deal not only with the complexity of, let's say, connections, but probably and hopefully also with the different payers and HTAs across Europe.
Excellent. No, thanks again, Stefan, Lutz, and the MAS team for the invitation and the opportunity to join the discussion. Thank you, everyone, also on the line. It's a lovely summer evening, so I hope you have a glass of wine or beer at hand to join. Again, I'm pleased to share some of my experience and considerations over the last couple of years. And a short disclaimer here: while I currently work at AstraZeneca, today I'm speaking in a personal capacity, and all views I express here are my own and not those of my employer. but that's clear. Let's get into it. So when I thought about the topic of today, I kind of identified 4 key challenges for market access in Europe. And usually you should come up with 3 to 4 priorities or challenges. I choose 4, and I picked the 4th one, budget impact, and put it on top of it. Well, those of you who are experienced in market access, most of you will say, well, that's quite boring, because that's always the issue. The reason why I wanted to highlight it here is really there are special scrutiny on drug budgets now after post-COVID. Well, we are still part of it in it. So after 2.5 years post-COVID, now with the financial crisis coming, this puts extra pressure on drug budgets. We will talk about it in a minute. So price pressure, mandatory price cuts are one of the consequences. The second key topic or challenge to me in Europe is access, time to access, and access inequalities across Europe. So we will see the data on the variation, and I think there's a clear call for rapid access requirements and also flexibility as clinical evidence evolves. Stefan has shown some of the opportunities of different levels of evidence. We will talk about this a bit more. Third point, value recognition. So there's clearly a widening gap between regulatory and payer HTA evidence needs. And particularly when you think, I'm very much working in oncology, obviously my current role. And so when you're getting into early diseases or more rare disease treatments that some of you might be working on, it's difficult to show value and evidence at time of regulatory approval. So these are topics to tackle. And the 4th one is pricing. As some of the elements we will talk about, that the innovation is not always fully valued and priced accordingly, and also coupled often with access delays and restrictions. So I've kind of structured the presentation to have one slide for each. At the end, it's also 2-3 slides for each of the topics, just to give you a bit of a framework. Let's get into it. First topic, budget pressure, budget inequalities. And as I mentioned, the recent financial crisis has led to a number of recent governmental actions. When I see recent, these are above and beyond what you usually see, taken by many European markets. And a few of them are highlighted here on the slides. One is clearly an increase of existing or a new reinstallment of clawbacks, industry clawbacks. So this is not product or company specific. We see this in Italy, in Spain, or measures of budget overrun, total budget overruns. We have this currently being discussed in France. We have it in place with in the UK with the VPAS, with increasing voluntary discounts. Well, it's called voluntary, but it's mandated discounts that are being asked. Mandatory price cuts are currently under debate in France for certain drug classes, not only for established product classes, but also for innovative drug classes, immuno-oncology, just as an example. There's also discussions in Germany, for example, of temporary increase of the mandatory discount, and for example, the restricted early access free pricing period is also a theme that appeared in Germany, but also restrictions of the Article 71, for those who are familiar with the Swiss system, is currently heavily being discussed and probably being implemented by end of this year. In the HTA markets, we've seen a recent change in the methods that apply in the UK, changing the ISA methodology, the end-of-life criteria with the 50,000 cost per quality threshold does not exist as such anymore. There's been a change to apply a severity model, which in some instances might be beneficial for particular assets, leading to higher prices or not. So just to close the first slide is, I mean, all these measures are familiar to those who have witnessed what happened after the financial crisis 2008 and 2009. So this is the situation we are in. That's on budget. Next topic, value recognition. And I pulled like two kind of pictures from the recent FPR weight report, April this year. Left-hand side, you see actually that across Europe, only 55% of drugs are reimbursed, products are reimbursed across Europe. Of course, to the left-hand side of the median here, you see a number of markets where the average of reimbursed drugs is higher, but there's also a number of markets where less than half of EMA-approved drugs are being reimbursed. And to the right-hand side, even more striking, I find, is the average time to reimbursement across Europe is around 550 days, which is 18 months, 1.5 years a drug. And I've taken oncology, that's my domain, but also because it's a field of high innovation. 1.5 years for a drug on average for usually life-threatening diseases from EMA regulatory approval until patients have access or, well, get it reimbursed. It's listed on a reimbursed list. Certainly a topic to be addressed. Third bullet, when we go into value, that was the third category to remind you, and I have 2-3 slides on that one, is just an overview that value per se is assessed differently across Europe. We all know that, but let's be aware of I've clustered it into 4 archetypes. There is clinical effectiveness that is being assessed, or the key driver of the assessment in France and Germany. Cost effectiveness, I mentioned this for the UK and other HTA markets, Sweden and many others as well, inside Europe and outside. There are markets that mainly look at budget impact per product, per franchise, Italy, Spain, and those that are referencing other markets to a high degree, Turkey and Switzerland. So it's a simplified view. It's clearly, I mean, we all know Switzerland is also doing a clinical assessment of drugs, and usually these are mixtures of bags, and it's simplified, but it helps to understand a bit what payers are looking for and what different assessments they are taking to value. If we go one further, that shows on the next slide, I've taken Germany here, and then the next slide, France, how this is being valued. And the story is really like since the last 10 years, since 300 drugs have been assessed, and you see in the big box in the pie chart that the majority of drugs, not only oncology, this is covering, is across therapeutic areas, majority of those have had non-additional non-added benefit assessed by IQWiG and GBA finally. Only a small proportion, you find about a third, had minor or considerable added benefit, and less than 1% have major added benefit. So in oncology, for example, I'm aware of only 3 examples. There was a recent example now to Kaiser in HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer, 3rd line, who received a major added benefit. So it's rather a rare occasion, and be aware these drugs coming in are already regulatory approved. So that speaks already to what I mentioned in the beginning, the widening gap between evidence requirement for regulatory pathways and the payer evidence requirements. Similar picture, next slide, for France. A slightly different context. The left-hand slide shows the clinical benefit assessment in France based on the SMR ratings. So the majority of drugs get, you don't need to see the details, it's really like the majority get an efficient ASMR rating. So there is clinical benefit, yes, but then on the bigger graph here, you see the ASMR rating, which assesses the added clinical benefit from a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is highest added clinical benefit, 5 is no added clinical benefit. You see that around over the years, 75 to 80% of drugs are rated with no clinical benefit, added clinical benefit, and only a small proportion, roughly 10%, get the highest ratings, ASMR 1 to 3. Again, for drugs that received regulatory approval previously. And last slide on the value recognition piece is the way kind of I thought I summarize it a bit, is the view. The small purple circles here indicate assessments today by HTA agencies are done by the clinical benefit assessment, as we discussed, based on the RCTs data available at hand. There's an unmet clinical need for each and every indication that is being considered, and the level of uncertainty. So this is the usual focus of the assessments. So you can take, and that would be an approach I strongly recommend, a broader approach of what value means, a more holistic approach. What are the added patient benefits, convenience, quality of life aspects, gains of time for patients and their families. Real world evidence was mentioned also by Stefan earlier, and the whole benefit for caregivers in the healthcare system as a whole is not considered in a total, at least not to a great extent. And also the level of uncertainty, let me add this here as well. When we come out of or have the initial data for a new drug or indication, the level of uncertainty with 1 or 2 randomized controlled trials is usually high, and as we are over time gaining certainty. But in most cases, in many cases, drugs and drug prices are not being reassessed unless you have really a major breakthrough. For example, OS data, overall survival data in oncology after 3 or 5 years. If you gain extra data, you can resubmit it. But usually assessment is happening in the beginning with high level of uncertainty, and that's actually priced in your value proposition. Let's close the value recognition chapter and move over to the last one on pricing. And well, one topic which is probably not going away, it's more and more emphasized. So this is usually animated here, but probably doesn't work. Doesn't matter. International reference pricing, a complex web of reference pricing, not only for EU5. The graph was actually showing that there's a complex web across all 28 EU markets. It's a powerful tool for payers to control the list price and to some extent then also the net price. There's other factors, we will not have time to dig into it, but I want to mention, of course, the cost of comparators comes into play. We are more and more entering into not being, all of us, kind of not entering markets on our own, but markets with a competitive environment already, where drugs are being priced against. Multi-indication pricing is a key topic to consider. 10, 12 indications for a drug. How is this being valued and priced at the end? Combination of drugs is the new reality, and another re-referencing and negotiation mechanisms. So we could spend an hour on this one, but I wanted to highlight some of the topics here within Europe that are relevant. If we go further on the next page, I pulled an example of a recent example of a breast cancer, metastatic breast cancer drug, and its relative prices in Europe, because the question really for us as a community, I would say as a market access community, is really what does fair pricing and innovation for innovation mean? So what you see here, the dots represent countries, European countries, and they are plotted here against price on the y-axis and their relative countries' economic power on the x-axis. So you see here a trend line that would probably represent value-based price. It depends how you define what value-based price means, but in principle there is a line, and there are some outliers, which is interesting to see. So for example, country A and B on the left-hand side have the same, well, roughly the same economic power. So question is, should they be paying the same price or not? They are not in this particular example. Same for countries C and D, have a higher but comparable economic power versus each other. Whereas country E and C indicated here pay roughly the same price but have different economic power. So again, it shows that usually over time, particularly countries of comparable economic power may pay different prices. And there's a lot of reasons, root causes for this to be aware of. One is the IRP, the international price referencing at some stage timing, of course, of access for these drugs, whether it's early or whether it's years after initial EMA approval. Multiple indications play a big role here, more and more in this picture. But there's also country-specific price regulations, as many of you know, and similar. I mean, there are individual arrangements between manufacturers and countries. Interesting picture, I find, and worth for us probably discussing. Last slide, I guess, on the, no, that's good. Okay. Yeah, that is something I would also like to show, because it shows really also the level of collaboration and attempts taken here. So this is an analysis done by an agency who looked at how the top 15 pharma companies have evolved in their approach of value-based arrangements. So when we talk about value-based or innovative pricing solutions, value-based arrangements, it means we're talking about not plain discounts, but price volume agreements, cost sharing, cost capping, these type of arrangements, outcomes-based agreements, performance-based arrangements. So more complexity and more value-based type of pricing arrangements. And what it shows, the purple bars indicate the situation 2018. The green one is 3 years later, and it shows different phases. There are 6 phases of excellence, right? From ad hoc local arrangements to, well, routine, complex contracting. And what you see is that the green bars are increasing to the right, which indicates that the majority of top 15 pharma markets are really making a commitment to value-based arrangements based on this phasing diagram. It's great to see, and it's one of the key trends, I think, to solve the challenges ahead together. Let me close with the final slide and keep it very short. Yeah, the budget pressures on innovation is a bigger topic. I would say it's not only price and market access related, but it's something is really about thinking. The industry needs to think about what is the narrative, to strengthen the narrative on the value proposition, on the innovation we bring to society. It's easy to cut drug prices or have mandatory price cuts here. That is a broader topic. Inequalities in access for new medicines. My big take is, yes, there are early access funding programs in some markets, like early access in France, for example, a paid early access program. We have the cancer drug funds in the UK, Article 71 I mentioned briefly in Switzerland, but this does not exist everywhere. And then we have the delays that I showed, 1.5 years or even longer. Innovative access and pricing solutions, as just mentioned, is certainly a lever to pull. 3, value recognition with evolving evidence is really the point of what study design and endpoints, other than, for example, overall survival in oncology, can be acceptable from a payer perspective, also in early disease. And how do we make sure that we take into account, or payers take into account, the increasing certainty over time, real-world evidence data. Just as an example, how do we bake this into the overall value story? And innovative pricing arrangements, again, I mean, increasing the value-based access solution toolbox is something that we can only achieve together with the stakeholders I showed on one of the slides. And a big topic, certainly, not only for oncology, is value attribution for combinations, where you have 2, 3 components combined for various disease areas and multiple indications. So these are some of the topics, and we have great opportunities, not only challenges. With that, I would like to close, and yeah, hope we have a good and open discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sandro. That was a great presentation, great insights of you. And now, dear lovely audience, do not forget to put your questions in the comment section on here on LinkedIn. So we see all your questions, and we have now actually quite a time to answer your questions. So I have a question, and the question is actually, I mean, that's really complex, and right? We see all the the countries. We saw the delay of 18 months until the product, like every patient in Europe, has access or reimbursement for that product. So how do you all organize and plan for an optimized submissions? Are there like special steps you're taking? Is there an advice, a big board to put all your countries on? Stefan? Sandro? Who wants to answer?
I mean, I don't know. Is Stefan still on the line? No, I don't want to
Yeah, should be.
over talk him. That's okay. I just spoke quite long, so might be good to change the voice for the audience.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take it as well.
Now he's back. Stefan, you're mute. Nope. Okay, welcome to a digital world. Now, Sandro, we just come back to your office. Do you have like a 10 meters planning board in your office, or how do you manage that?
No, I mean, some point probably we should have, right, given all the topics we've just discussed. No, I mean, probably a key success factor without going to I mean, we don't need to go through all the details. One element that was true and still is true is the early planning, and it sounds a bit boring, but it's really also early engagement. So when I, particularly for Europe, when we are planning for success, take the advantage of early advices in Germany, France, UK, and other markets. Get the feedback early, get the engagement early. And also during the later stages for the clinical development planning, later on in the kind of peri-launch phase, also full engagement, and many of you might know it, also not only with payers, but inform it and support it also with the medical community, get scientists, clinicians on board to support it, patient group involvement. I mean, all the stakeholder groups that are relevant here. I'm not talking about what kind of we need to do internally. There was more like an external perspective. But I head over to Stefan. If can you speak and want to add to it? No.
No. Now, Stefan? Okay, I think we have a wonderful internet provider here in Weil am Rhein. Thank God we don't have the minister here for the digital innovations with us. Stefan? No. So, okay. So actually just take over. So actually as you said, Sandro, already, one part of early engagement is engaging to the payers, as they're in advance, do the preparation for the dossier submissions, for example, with the Federal Joint Committee. And as we always want to point out, right, you have the chance to get in advance to the payers and ask for their advice, especially with the Federal Joint Committee here in Germany, or you can have a consultation and ask for acceptance of special endpoints, which makes it like easier when you're writing the dossier, or even like appropriate comparator therapies, and align with the clinical evidence, and also with the expectation on the prices a little bit. So that is a clear point what you would say. But now that was just like the first questions. Look in our chat. We see here some more questions, and I want to point out here Martina. She thanks you very much for your explanation and is asking if a value-based pricing for innovative health services, and I don't know what actually services and what this means, can be an option to be assessed in addition to an innovative medicines. So it's actually the combination of the drug with, yeah, I wouldn't know, with a supportive app or a supportive nurse, something like that. and then she's saying, then we could see which countries with different levels of as economics may focus on health services to be insured. So is that something like a combination, also services in combination with drugs is like another, or is a way to get closer in that topic of pricing, especially, and value for pricing?
Yeah, I mean, I can give it a start. I mean, it's yeah, services is a good term. I think it's a good point to make. And it's the question to all of us: what additional services can we offer above and beyond the drug itself, which is already a lot, but might not be the discriminator, not enough. And one observation, probably I put it this way. Also during and after COVID, I mean, it was not only a bad thing, if I may say it, from an kind of an innovation perspective, it has accelerated some things. And just to mention two, one is an accelerator of, well, diagnostics. Everyone got aware how important diagnostics is. Not only the drugs, but the diagnostics. We all got tests to buy in pharmacies and got tested, whether lateral flow or PCR tests. So that's very clear. The society and the healthcare systems got to appreciate the value of diagnostics. And that's part of a big value stream, I would say, on the additional services towards personalized healthcare as well. The other one is digital. So yeah, patients, societies. I mean, everyone got used to whatever COVID apps, whatever, or blood pressure measuring apps. So the experience with digitalization is very clear and is part of our value building story. So diagnostics, digital, and drugs is certainly something to bring into the equation. And I would agree that should be part of, and it's probably a good suggestion on the slide that I've shown. That's not shown. So it's a good third dimension to show, in fact. So thanks for the hint. If that was the purpose of the question, as a speaker, I realized it would be good to include it as a pillar. Additional services is important, and to then assess, as you outline, who is actually willing and able to pay the additional services. And sometimes it can also be more cost effective if you choose the right patient for the right drug. I mean, this is the purpose of personalization and diagnostics helping us to do so.
Okay, and Stefan is also answering, I think this is more theory. Payers do not go their way. Add-on services might be fine on a local level. On a national level, it also depends on the administration burden. So, and keep always in mind that payers do not only deal with one company, but with really many companies. And so if they go it the one way, right, then the other next company is coming, oh, we want to actually have like the same benefit as the others. But then just move on to the next question. So Mohammed is asking, do you think effective patent lives are taken or should be taken into consideration in market access agreements of innovative medicines? So Mohammed is pointing like about I mean, there's patent protection a lot. We know that well, it's actually clock is ticking, right? The product is like ongoing, and if you already like, I mean, the patent protection really starts earlier, and then it's running. Well, and then the product comes on the market. We saw the delay of 18 months, and then it's all in place in Europe, and then a few years later, like the patent already expires. So should be there like more agreements of protection, so we have like more protections for innovative medicines?
Yeah. I mean, one way of it has several aspects, I guess, the question. think patent life should be considered, and just kind of I mean, I'm just thinking of one example in breast cancer where, due to the outstanding results, the regulatory body EMA has prolonged the patent life by 1 year. So that's not exactly your question, because we were talking about market access agreements, but on the regulatory side, I've just seen this recently, that patent life was granted for 1 year more based on the great data. So it is happening. Patent life is variable to a certain extent based on the data. The other part, on the market access side, there's a huge debate currently. The European Commission is looking at equitable access across Europe, like the FPA data that I showed you is something that is of importance for the European Commission as well. And they are asking industry also to participate in equitable access, and offering that each and every, and probably many of you know it, but I'm just kind of recollecting my memory because it's quite recent and it will have an impact on the whole industry, is asking that countries commit, and the FPR, which is the European Pharmaceutical Association, has agreed, and the member states have agreed to submit filings for the drugs within 24 months, within 2 years after regulatory approval. And the reason is that the European Commission is actually aiming to potentially reduce the patent life if this is not the case. I mean, it's out there, it's being discussed, but I just wanted to share the consideration. There's also a task of market access and yes, there is a connection between patent life and market access. So we as an industry need to make sure that drugs reach patients out there and across Europe, and this will have a positive impact on the patent life. So 2 examples: great data have an impact on patent life, regulatory, but also the recognition and the obligation to submit our filings across Europe has an impact potentially on patent lives, or not to be reduced.
Great question. Thank you, Mohamed. And now our good friend Michael Zürcher here from Cesaro joining us tonight. So thanks so much. Great insights. What is your mid to long-term best guess for pricing levels in Europe? Although Michael is looking for Nostradamus, I'm thinking. So do we keep the price level? I think it's not that, well, it's maybe with inflation, there's a rising price level, but that's another topic. So what's your opinion of this? Do we just can keep our price level, or it's going down?
It's an interesting question. We were just debating with a couple of colleagues. We were debating this, whether the question is, have price levels, and I would like to ask the audience, but I can't. If it was not virtual, I would ask, what do you think? Have price levels changed over the last 10 years or 15 years? Which is not quite easy to answer. Have prices gone up or down? If you ask payers, often they say prices have gone up. Is that really true in Europe? I mean, you need to compare. What are you comparing? We are operating with multiple indications and so on. Have, for example, in breast cancer, prices gone up? Not so much if you launch something new. And is it the price per innovation? If I look at the UK as an example, where we have an ISA threshold of 30,000, I think that was set like 20 years ago, and it has stayed. We are all debating about 8% inflation now. So if you put this back for the last 20 years, have prices been stable in the UK? Probably not. In other regions, probably yes. So it's hard to say. I'm a strong believer that innovation gets its value, and really depends also on the disease area at the end of the day. For innovations is valued. Price pressure is, of course, outside when you are in metabolism and in these type of diseases. There's a lot of price pressure and competition. Really depends on the legacy of other brands, of the competitive landscape, how mature the market is, but I think there is a chance with innovative and personalized approaches to keep price levels for certain disease areas.
Okay, great. So Stefan's opinion on that is actually that the price levels are always depending on the disease areas. Evidence outcomes drive also higher with a willingness to pay, but also lower sometimes, right? When you're thinking of just a small added benefit, for example, and think about the economic downturn now just starting. Yeah, so that is like just a burden disease. So Daniel's actually asking, what is the importance of patient-related outcomes in renegotiations of contracts since the length of deals become shorter? Do you have any personal experiences or best practices on that? That's a tricky question. Then pulls out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stefan is commenting that he's not sure that deals are getting shorter. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Stefan. You read Stefan's comments. That's good.
Yeah. So and he's also mentioned that patient-related outcomes are always important as being patient relevant, right? So these are patient relevant endpoints, for example, the Federal Joint Committee in Germany wants to see. So yeah. So it is important. What we also see is when we look on benefit assessments. So when coming back, right? Drugs are coming back, for example, for a limitation in time of the decisions that, for example, with the latest ATMPs, patient-related outcomes are even getting like more important, right? They're even like, you know, clinical studies are challenged. So why did not evaluate this in your clinical studies? So by the authorities. So, and I think also in combination with real world evident outcomes, so was also pointing out that might even increase further that demanding for real patient related outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, it's you've said it. No need to repeat it. I would just probably add that it's always important. PR is always important. If you're lucky, then your original study population, if you have a follow-up of your data in oncology, often we have multi-year follow-ups, and so which is also important over the years. Then that becomes also very important for the renegotiations. And again, renegotiations can be opened from both sides. So when do these happen? Either after a fixed period, after 2-3 years of initial granting of reimbursement, or sometimes it can also be kind of triggered by the manufacturer, right? If you have a new data at hand and can reopen, depending on the market, of course. And then it's often in oncology, we see this quite often, that, for example, you show OS data after 2, 3, or 5 years of the study follow-up. But this is a great question with the PROs in combination with real-world evidence, certainly absolutely important and of increasing importance for us.
Yeah. And now actually Enrique is asking, how do you think of the new EU HTA assessment? And that was actually also my question, right? Enrique now points out here with the joint HTA, right, coming all, as this is coming currently prepared with a UNETA 21. And will change all this market access environment, and will that be soon changed? So I think we saw all the plans. I'm a little bit skeptical how fast we are, right? And Stefan is actually commenting EU HTA first needs to deliver, right? They have to set up the framework, the rules. They have to set up the templates or what data they want to have. And then Spanish experts generally say that they have such a system since decades, nationally and then regional submissions. It's not really getting more effective or actually efficient, Stefan thinks. And then the core question actually remains if a dossier for a joint HTA can be delivered at the time of EMA approval, or is it just the EMA approval and then we have to wait and to deliver or to develop actually the HTA EU HTA dossier, right? And this might be even add more complexity if you do not compare against one comparator, but against a Spanish comparator or a French comparator or a German comparator. And we have also seen that in the past that comparators might still be different and price negotiations are still, as our good friend here from Switzerland, Professor Zweifel always says, right, like pricing is still a national thing. So price negotiations are still at a national level. Yeah. So do you agree, Sandro, with Stefan's opinion here on that? Or
no, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, there's many elements that are really yet unclear, unknown. At the same time, I wouldn't downplay it vice versa. I mean, the regulation is supposed to come into force as of 2025. So 2.5 years to go. I would strongly recommend to take this very serious and be part of the discussion if you're not yet. That's a take. But clearly there's a lot of unknowns, and as Stefan has pointed out, these joint assessments will focus on the scientific analysis. That's true, and particularly the relative effects of the health technology is assessed on the health outcomes against the chosen parameter. And also the degree of uncertainty. What is then on the national level is in fact then the value assessment, what's called the appraisal, and how so that's still national. And but it's a super important topic, and we could spend probably an hour just talking about this one. And we are also part of various working groups. Have a working group. I think many of the companies do have these to assess and provide feedback to via FPR and on their own on the methodology, on the detailed methodology on how to do this assessment.
Great. So I think that was the last questions for today. Once again, check out our website, www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de here for also recording of that video. And there you can also rewatch the slides of Sandro. Sandro, great presentation. Thank you for today joining us. Also, thank you, Stefan, to be there. Okay, now let's just organize myself here on that fancy web page here to give you 2 more slides. So the one slide I want to point out, one point is actually check out our podcast. So we have MAPS, the Market Access podcast, the only market access podcast who is really out there. And Stefan has has always great guests now with already 17 episodes, right? It's like being adult almost, right? And Stefan is actually commenting with a perfect audio actually, right? And there we have actually a great episode. Is European market access really so difficult? With Esther and Sansa here from Decisive, a great colleague also from the UK. So if you're interested in that webinar, you also want to like that. And actually, we have, Stefan's pointing out we already have more than 20. So we are actually grown up a little bit. And we are celebrating 1 year Market Access podcast here in September. So you don't want to miss here our anniversary episode. And then also we want to point out our next webinar, really going, further than the next step here with that topic, also with Sandro's topic. So I'm sure Sandro also will join us that day. So Dr. Stefan Walzer, Esther, and Nick Leach here, also from the UK. We are discussing all joint HTA, Brexit, and Project Orbis, right? Another thing. So is that all market access really getting easier, or is it really getting more complex, more complicated. So that's the next webinar here on our LinkedIn stream. That's actually on the last Thursday of the month, last Thursday in August 25th at 9 p.m. Central Summertime here in Europe, or at 1200 at noon in Pacific time. So thank you, Sandro, for joining us here tonight. Great presentation once more. And thank you, all audience, for the lovely questions. Then talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.